I had the privilege of working with a nonprofit in Seattle for almost 8 years, where we really evolved the organization in a way I'm so just proud of. And the team I worked with was just mind-blowingly amazing. And from representation to culture to structure and policies. And like you talked about, this energy, which is very nebulous, but very real. Any new hire will pinpoint pretty quickly what's the energy, what's the vibe. And we really overhauled the whole shebang, and by far the hardest part of building a more inclusive operation was that looking in the mirror, right? Sitting with a very uncomfortable truth about how we were not doing right by everyone and how I was complicit in that. Not because I was necessarily doing anything wrong, but because I wasn't being brave and bold and risky enough to do things right. You know what I mean? I was clinging to comfort, clinging to fear of conflict, clinging to, probability instead of possibility. Will you talk to us a little bit about this cultural evolution that you are part of with the Washington Commanders? And, I know it's only been a couple of years, but what lessons are you learning thus far on this journey?
Yes, that's a great framing for it, actually. So for me, I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done, and I think there's probably three big lessons in it for me, and things that were hard for me. The first is that you don't get what you don't measure. You don't get what you don't measure, and culture and people and employee sentiment and engagement and all that stuff, it feels like soft stuff to most organizations. And it's not something that you really measure and expect growth on the same way you do on your other business metrics. If you're in the nonprofit world, you got fundraising goals, you better hit those doggone fundraising goals, right? Or you're not gonna make payroll or whatever it is. For those of us in for-profit businesses, we've got EBITDA targets and all of that stuff. You have to measure culture, and you have to embed that measurement into how the whole organization works, or it's meaningless. It's smoke and mirrors, it's semantics, and honestly, at worst, it's performative. It's performative for people outside of the building, which many organizations are content to do. We could have been content to do that. It's like, just how the hell do we get out of the news, right? And just do a bunch of performative stuff to get out of the news. But I knew that we needed to really do it. And so we measured ourselves, and there's lots of different ways to do it. We used an employee culture survey that our initial one put us in the bottom quartile of organizational health and culture, as you can imagine, benchmarked against thousands of other companies. And it was very specific on the things that were issued. It also raised the names in the free text. It raised the names of people I needed to look into. It did a lot of the work for me. But a year later, we measured along that same dimensions, and we were above the median for the media and entertainment industry and already in the top quartile in sports. And I think it's because everybody knew that we were going to measure, and every leader knew that their evaluation from me was going to be, in large part, I think technically a third of their entire evaluation is due to how they led their department on the people journey that was going to be measured in these ways on the culture survey, and that their bonus was tied to that, their rating was tied to that, all of that. When you embed it and you make it structural, it actually becomes real to folks. So that's the first one. The second thing, and this was different for me, because as you see, like, I'm sort of like a touchy-feely guy. I want to believe in human potential always. And when I got here, it was clear that some people didn't need to be here. There were other folks, it was like, in my mind, well, maybe it could work. Maybe it could work. The learning that I had, or the lesson I had in the last 2 years, is that if I have questions, I need to trust my gut. We've now turned over 100% of my top team, 95% of the top 2 layers, and I think 77% of the organization is new since I got here. And that's not something I ever would have recommended as a consultant. That's not something I had ever planned to do, because it's very disruptive. Like, I mean, having these conversations and walking people out with boxes and stuff like that, it's not fun. That weighs on your soul. It's hard to do over time. But if I could go back, I would do more of it more quickly. Because what I've learned is that, especially when it comes to people and culture and our values and the vision of where we want to go, my gut was often way more right than my head and my logic. And it actually would have been better for those employees if we hadn't tried to do this dance for another year when all of our guts were telling us this is not the right marriage. This is not the right fit to be in. And it's because, like, I do believe that our subconscious, our brains are processing information that we don't even know it's processing, and that informs what we feel in our gut when these situations arise. And we would have been in even a stronger place as an organization if I'd made some of those things more quickly and made the hard decisions and made the really hard decisions. And then I'd say the last thing that I've learned over the last year, and that I think is important in a culture transformation, is to remember the why. It is about people. It is about people feeling dignified, but also it's because you want a well-performing business. And treating people well and having healthy culture actually is directly tied to business outcomes, as is diversity and representation, experientially, but yes, demographically as well. And so through all of our change, we are now the most diverse leadership team in the NFL. My leadership team is 40% women, 50% people of color. And that team, even with our context of negative headlines every week, ownership getting lambasted, all of that stuff, our season ticket member base is up 21,000 people. We are #1 in new suite sales in the NFL. And where you thought we would have been hit on sponsorship, we're up 25% on sponsorship. And by the end of the weekend, knock on wood, we'll have signed the biggest sponsorship deal in team history. And that is a credit to a diverse leadership team. If they were not the diaspora, then this would not have gotten done, because we have a diverse fan base, we have diverse clients. And if we weren't doing, they're doing these deals because of us as individuals and what we represent. And my goal, ultimately, I'm going to have the biggest impact on the industry, not because of what I represent, the way I speak, all that stuff, that will have an influence. But if we are successful financially, everybody else will pay attention and they'll be like, well, I want to make money too. Maybe I should hire a Black person. Maybe I should have more women on my senior team. And that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I want, because people don't want to make change. Change is very hard. And I think we are coming to the end of a period where there's disproportionate attention on DEI. The backlash is coming, in my opinion. And so we need to show performance on the other side of this. And so that's the picture I would give on culture and leadership over the last year.